Welcome to the Boston Quantara podcast, where we explore AI governance with industry leaders and innovators. In each episode, we discuss the challenges AI poses to businesses and how to harness its potential responsibly. Join us for insights on navigating the complexities of AI to achieve new heights in your organization.
Hello, it's Damien Spears here, Director of Boston Quantara. Welcome to our second edition of AI Governance Live, which is obviously sponsored by Boston Quantara. Today's topic is building ethical AI Centre of Excellences. At the end of this session, we will have a Q&A via our chat box, so please post any questions and then I will pose to the panel. We are joined, as always, by our subject matter expert, our resident subject matter expert, Ben Christensen. So I'd like to hand over to you, Ben, to introduce yourself to our audience and also our panelists today, please.
Thank you, Damien. My name is Ben Christensen, and I build technology that helps humans connect to humans. I work with responsible AI principles because I believe at this time in humanity, we see a historic trend where people start to trade their freedoms of expression and speech when economic mobility is threatened. That drives the overall movement that I take part in when it comes to responsible AI principles: fairness, accountability, transparency, safety, security, sustainability. That said, there are people here who have been working and building centers of excellence in trusted AI for years, in business, in government. We're going to get to talk to two of them today. What is a center of excellence? Why is this important in a changing regulatory and risk compliance market background? And what are the frameworks we should use? So I want to introduce the panelists. Pamela Gupta is the CEO of Trusted AI. Igor Jablokov is the founder and CEO of Prion. Pamela, would you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Damien. Really looking forward to this discussion because I believe in leveraging COE as a yes center. And so let me step back and talk about who I am and why this is important. My name is Pamela Gupta. I've been in the field of looking at how to de-risk AI adoption for over 5 years because my lens that I look at the world through is business is going to be asking for the next best thing that's coming down the pike, and there's going to be risk involved if it's too complex, and if they think it inhibits innovation, they're going to be asking the organization to proceed and not understand the risk. And if it's too complex, they're not going to try to figure out how to resolve it, and that can really impact the outcomes and the business itself. So in other words, it can inhibit innovation if the risks are not understood and dealt with strategically and proactively. So I started taking a look at it 5 years ago as to how do we make this a reality, because I'm very passionate about AI and what we can do with AI. And actually, that's the reason I came to the US from India, because I wanted to pursue a career in AI. So I wanted to set the tone that it is on. I'm looking at it as a COE, that's the topic for today, as a yes center, as an excellence center that can help create that innovation and outcomes that we are looking to create for business, for society, for all of us in a responsible and a trustworthy fashion. And then I'll talk later about a framework I had built to help operationalize that, make it happen, because it's good to have standards, but if we don't understand that at the front lines and at the implementation level, then again, we will not be able to achieve the value. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Pamela. I'm impressed by the stunning wealth of experience you have in your journey, and thank you for choosing to spend so much of your intellect, efforts, and talent in building up responsible businesses on AI specifically. We're all beneficiaries. Igor Yablokov, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm founder and chairman of. So, where does the word Prion come from? So, I used to lead an early AI team at IBM, and I was frustrated that they didn't want to move at the pace that I wanted to. So, I departed and stood up my last company. And 5 years after it started, we were acquired on the down low by Amazon, and that's how Alexa was born. Alexa's my older sister's name, and the code name for it was Prion. Now, we decided to catch her on football. After that, I was like, where is this stuff at work? And where is it in our academic institutions, and where is it in our power plants and water treatment and in our hospitals and airports and things of that sort? I didn't really see anybody taking it seriously beyond sitting in our kitchens, in our bedrooms, doing news, weather, sports, music, and things of that sort. So that's when we decided to catch her on football and reconvene the team and start working on fashioning what would now be known as an enterprise AI that essentially meets more robust needs of accuracy, scale, security, and speed. So think of it as what would it look like if it was a zero trust AI that's focused on human performance optimization. Now I got this phone call out of the blue one day, and the fellow on the other side said, "Hey, I think you're onto something, trying to bring this stuff to work. And I think you're going to do it a different way from everybody else in Silicon Valley. So let me become your biggest investor. Let me join the board and help you run the company." And that was JD Vance.
No way. We've heard of him recently. So, Igor, Pamela, you both know what it takes to build the center of excellence, or at least the role of trusted AI systems in business, and you've done it. AI strategy is not foreign to you, it's familiar. There are lots of folks who are trying to do what you've done in both business and government. So I want to ask the question to you both. Start with Pamela. What is a center of excellence? How do you define its role in AI strategy?
In a very high level and a simplistic lingo or language, I would say a center of excellence is a capability that an organization can use to efficiently deliver value for AI. And I'm only referencing COE for Center of Excellence for AI. What does that mean? How do you make it efficient and deliver value? Because the premise of AI and the nature of AI is so different from existing systems. So if we step back and take a look at how we can deliver value through a COE, it would be through two things. One is, how do you set up the center of excellence? It is not, like I said in the beginning, it's not supposed to be a no center. It's supposed to be not just policies, but a yes center of how the business or the organization can deliver value with AI. Having said that, these are complex systems. So, what is different and what is required to deal with that uncertainty and that dynamic volatility that comes with AI systems? The way I have approached it for my clients is to create a cross siloed internal organization that is staffed from representatives from business, those who understand the business value and the business alignment and objectives, data science, engineering teams, and data governance and the governance folks. Okay, and that includes data governance as well as security. So one might ask, if there is such a
Broad
wide
set.
range, how do you make it efficient? And that's where the value comes in of knowing how to create that efficiently and have these skills and mindset actually contribute when it's required, how it's required. In other words, if there are too many people, cooks in the kitchen, we know, then it cannot lead to the best outcomes, right? May not have the best meal, let's say. Okay, in that case. But cross-siloed representation is important. It has to be done and set up in a way that they can actually provide leverage and weight to each other's inputs. Okay, so that's one thing. And the other one is, of course, making sure that the COE has a standardized way of looking at processes and the guidance, and especially and really important to keep the talent pipeline filled. And that's both with internal staff, with hiring, and capability building. So there is a lot. I know I covered a few areas, but I can expand more on it. But those are the two things that I would say:
Thank you.
cross-siloed approach and standardized, right?
Cross-siloed approach and standardized. I know that Igor has spent a lot of time building augmented intelligence, helping companies do similar when it comes to, you mentioned it can be very inefficient when you have a broad spectrum of folks with knowledge. Igor, would you share about that?
Yeah, what's exciting about AI though, if it's such a multidisciplinary effort, and I think that's why she mentioned getting a cross section of humanity in one of these organizations together. And the reason why it's like an opera is when you actually look at it, it's the art form that is essentially the fusion center of the arts, right? You have the architecture, it's a business, there's audience reaction, there's a set, there's a story, there's a hidden story in terms of a parable, there's music, there's dance, there's costumes, and things of that sort as well. And it all gets combined together. Now, the problem is economics is the allocation of scarce resources. When I look at a lot of these COEs, let's say for a major financial services institution, they get all these ideas like, hey, we want to test or adopt AI. And a lot of times they say, that's fine, let's run a business case. And if it doesn't meet the threshold of $5 million impact and above, we're not going to tackle it because we just don't have enough people in order to do that as well. So they needed to hold a line. Now, here's the problem and why you need like an inverse function to the COE in some cases is because a lot of innovation happens with complete accidents
Right.
and things of that sort where you wouldn't have a business case. Like the early stuff that I tried doing at IBM when I was leading the AI team, I couldn't sign up to $100 million in impact after 12 months. A lot of my peers were claiming that they can do it. Well, their programs all faltered, and the person that couldn't prove 100 million ended up turning into multi-billion, if not multi-tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of business impact as well. I just couldn't see it at that point in time. This is where I think there has to be some healthy tension release to say, are there some no-code tools that we can put as a peer process of that in order to allow people to do some rapid prototyping and essentially prove that their macaroni drawings have value as well. So that's the way that I see that. At the same time now, you're seeing the creation of some of these entities, but you're also seeing some water going around a rock, right? In terms of, as the Pentagon is saying, we created these structures like the CDAO, formerly known as the JAIC, and concepts like DIU. How do we reform those, combine them, or turn them off? So these things are a work in process, right? There's no set script for these things, and I think the world is still trying to figure out what's the best way to essentially adapt their organizations with these style of constructs.
Thank you. And when you say chief data CDAOs, we're understanding chief data and analytics officers.
No, I meant it's the group, it's what used to be called the Joint AI Center for the military and things of that sort. It's just an example of one of
Okay,
these COEs, is what I meant. It's now called the CDAO.
great. Keeping on the same page.
Yeah.
Can you give us examples of some of these? Would you be willing to share examples, Pamela or Igor, of success where you've done this? I know you just mentioned one, Igor. Pamela, and if you have another one, Igor, we'd love to hear that illustrated, that opera in process, or however it goes.
Yeah, I have multiple. Let me not start with my own clients because that's always
Privilege.
yeah, it's you don't want to, it may not be in their best interest. But let's take a look
That's
at
why
some.
that's trust. You're protecting trust right there.
That's that is true, and also I think some of it can be generalized. So I think we can still see the value and not have too much value. Let's take a look at what Igor, what you were mentioning. For example, having the ability to take a look at experimenting. And I would say that an AI COE can help with that experimenting much. You can get further than if you were doing it in silos, right? Because now you have a way of taking a look at what is going to be a roadblock that has already been solved. For example, how can I leverage internal resources, external resources, the ecosystem, etc. Having said that, let's take a look at a couple of things that have come out with a recent review from Harvard Business Review. Okay, of what is differentiated between those who are leading with AI and those who are dabbling in AI, let's say, or adopting it and trying to see how they're going to get value out of it. There were three things. One is that those who are leading are with generative AI now, because that's really important to mention actually. The landscape has changed so much because of the introduction of generative AI from what was predictive AI in the past, is that the time to get that value has gone down from 18 months in some cases to as low as 6 months. That's pretty significant when you're talking about looking at dabbling and seeing if your POC will work, for example. That's one thing. The other is that those who are involved from the leadership side, right? We hear about this all the time, right? If you want something to succeed, it has to have a CEO level or C level backing. There is almost a discrepancy right now that we are seeing between the what leadership is expecting in terms of gains from AI and the rest of the organization, right? So that is really important to understand what that means and how to bridge that gap. Okay. The third is things, those who are taking this COE level kind of maturity approach to AI are those are the companies that are seeing maximum gains, okay? Because again, it's taking some of that risk out, it's taking some of that guesswork out. And there are two examples that I want to talk about. One is Target, which is as one of the top 10 retailers globally by revenue.
Yeah.
They rolled out a generative AI initiative in January of this year, I believe, or last year. And they had AI COE, which was bridging the gap between IT and operations. They were able to see gains within 6 months. Okay. And what they were doing is they rolled out generative AI chatbots to 2,000 of their retail sites. Okay. Put it in the hands of those who are on the front lines, who are using these chatbots to get business ways or processes, etc., making it a lot more achievable and at everybody's hands, right? In terms of how to scale up, how to go into a new line of business, how to, etc., etc. But things that are nothing, no secret sauce. So there's no intellectual property there that can be compromised, but it's more of practical things that can help them with their daily jobs. Okay. And if you think of a retailer, part of the institutional knowledge requirement is also very useful for those temporary workers, or if they're during retail high season, such as holidays, for example. People coming in from outside, they need to ramp up quickly to do a job. So that, I think, is a perfect example of a company that has adopted an AI COE approach to be able to move faster with rolling out their intended outcomes. Okay. And the other one is for Chase, actually, which is you were talking about financial industry, Igor. To support that, they brought in a generative AI platform for contract evaluations. And the gains that they're looking at are 360,000 human hours savings. Okay, which is, if you do the math, is a lot of people for in a year. Okay. Because of, and in that scenario, they had approached it from an agentic AI platform for generative AI, which is a different manifestation of generative AI, but it's making it more autonomous, for example. But I'm just drawing the two examples out of what we are seeing is actually playing out as advantages with a responsible and a trustworthy and intelligent approach when it comes to managing your risks and identifying the value to risk proposition from these two companies. But there are a lot more, but I'll just stop here.
I have follow-up questions, but I want to give Igor the chance to speak as well.
Yeah, and I think Ben, if you roll it back to the trigger point for why we're even having these conversations is when ChatGPT was released. you got to think of it in 3 acts, right? When it was released, the first act, the first year, everybody was panicking. Everybody was panicking. What does this mean for my industry? What does it mean for my company? What does it mean for my portfolio? So there was a lot of introspection and panic, and boards were losing their minds. Every day there was something in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times that everybody was clipping back and forth to each other, endless HBRs and things of that sort. So that was Act One. Act Two, the picks and shovel crowd were out in force. Oh my gosh, you're not going to survive or thrive if you don't have your own large language model and things of that sort. And everybody was building crazy here and there, blah, 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 different pilots, this and that. Things failed, things worked. Obviously, in that example, things worked out and things of that sort. In phase three, everybody was scratching their head like, all right, if the adoption of these technologies follows a 5-step process where step 1 is imagineering and step 2 is getting a business case and step 3 is where's the data and then step 4 is all right, let's run our pilot of choice, and then step 5 is so let's figure out how to adopt it. Can we get a budget in place and it supports our existing information architecture? I remember pre-pandemic, around the time that you and I originally met, and I gave a talk at the Chief Digital Officers Forum, and they're like, hey, what's one thing that you would warn us all for this thing that we're about to do with AI? And I'm like, easy. You're all going to waste my time for 1 calendar year. Because
Uh,
all of you are going to think you can build this yourself. And yet I can't fly your planes, I can't grow your food, I can't make your clothing, I can't design your cars. And yet somehow those are molecules and these are electrons, and you think that you can make these things, and it's going to be near impossible for you to design something at the level of accuracy, scale, security, and speed that would meet your definitions of enterprise grade, telco grade, defense grade, bank grade technologies and things of that sort. And that literally was, if I have to look at Prime as a company, our biggest competition was not some mid-market or hyperscalers or things of that sort. One after the other, we encountered these Fortune 500 companies that hired their designated nerds that tried to build this stuff for themselves. Now, the place where they knew certain things, they had subject matter experts and some core IP and things like that that was advantageous to them, they were successful in. The stuff that was, shall we say, more diffuse and not in their sweet spot, not their major, but their minor, all of those things face planted, and they're just better off now rolling into Act 3, which is acquiring the technology from companies that are purpose-built, the AI native companies that were all born during this time frame.
how do you talked about making mistakes and when you can do it better, happy accidents perhaps. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
Bob Ross, actually, happy accidents. But in mission critical businesses and government, and you've seen this, the accidents aren't usually called happy accidents because we're not painting a picture, or at least they don't feel like they're painting a picture. There's some really significant consequences. Pamela, you've found ways to help companies minimize risk, navigate ever changing and accelerating compliance changes in the market. Igor, I think you've been doing similarly. How do you do this without stifling innovation? You talked about how actions can lead to innovation. There's a spectrum here, and I feel like they're a paradox to each other. Share with us advice on how you minimize risk, comply with regulation without stifling innovation. If that's important, I think it is.
I think I'll
Well, I
let
can,
Igor go first, and then
yeah,
because I have
I'll
a
give
lot
you
to say.
I'll give you a fun example, right? To break the Gordian knot of innovation at IBM, at times we had invented things and we weren't sure what they were good for, so we created an internship program called Extreme Blue, where we took 4 undergraduate, technical candidates with one top MBA candidate, and we created these mini companies over the course of the summer. We gave them our raw technology, and we just saw what the macaroni drawings would look like at the end of the summer, and they were typically fantastical. And then we were able to go to the actual folks that worked full time in the company and say, look, if 5 folks that aren't even credentialed yet did this with this technology, what can you do now? So it essentially broke down the barrier, and it also, they weren't encumbered by existing business processes, regulations, and things like that. We just got to see all the with new chipsets, new AI technologies, new machine translation technologies, and things of that sort. And that's why typically when I show up to the org and they immediately go to galactic level, world ending use cases, and that 100 people are looking, and the compliance officers and the legal officers, I'm like, hey, do you have an AI that can tell me what today's soup of the day is in your cafeteria? No. I'm like, let's start with that. Because here's why there's lots of failed projects in DoD. They go try to write down all the requirements down to the thing, they test everything, they document everything, everything's double secret octopus, double checked and things of that sort. And then at the end of 10 years later, when they get the technical delivery of whatever that asset was, it's no longer relevant. Instead, do the little step and then another little step and then a bigger step and then a little bit even bigger step, boom, and then after 10 years you have your Skynet solution. I prefer the small wins that people can tuck in their pockets quickly, that are in safe places of the location. And now I'm starting to see what were some of the safe stuff in terms of early use cases. Obvious things, help desk support. It's interacting with the content that the whole world can see anyway. There's phase one. And then it drops to, oh, now we can do stuff for employee interaction. Step two, and ooh, now we got to have on-prem the secret IP that defines who we are as individuals. The other thing is when you adopt these technologies, there's so many vendors out there, some of the top brands, they're drama llamas. They say,
What
oh
is
my
that?
God, they're drama llamas. They're like, we're making a burning bush. We're making AGI. Oh, this fantastical godlike
Yeah.
entity is what we're making. And everybody feels like that's what needs to be at the center of their Fortune 500 organizations. And I roll my eyes. I'm like, you have to treat AI as an intern that shows up for the first day of work. And day one, what are you going to do with an intern? You're just going to teach them how to search. Here's the cafeteria. Here's your badge, here's your laptop, here's the restroom, here's a book, here's your mentor. Day one is search. Day two, once they know how to search, you give them a lightweight workflow. I want you to move this box from here to here. I want you to do this to the printer. I want you to read this asset and things of that sort. That's day two. Day three, nature, and then nurture them. And then, yes, by the end of a dozen months, you will see something fantastical. Here's what's wild. That's how we absorb biological entities, and yet somehow we think AI has to be this mystical thing that's all seeing and all knowing on day one. And yet, think about most organizations. On the first day that we join the job, and in the 365th day on the job, we're paid exactly the same. And yet we know a lot more on day 365 than we do day one. And yet somehow everybody assumes that this AI just shows up and all of a sudden it's a master of the universe.
I appreciate the step-by-step process that you're laying out. This is useful, and the gradations to how you should anthropomorphize or not anthropomorphize a the use of an AI in your organization, and how both of those approaches can be useful muses for giving it the right amounts of trust and reach. This is fascinating, and it leads me to want to build on what Pamela started us with on she's worked with this diverse group of people in the C-suite who have the task to work together across silos to make a high-performing AI team. How would you build how do you take that team, maybe it's not high performing to begin with on the AI bit, but given your experience, and I think this applies to both of you, how do you build diverse, high performing AI teams with the people you identify that prioritize ethics? Because we're assuming that ethics are important. Challenge it if you
Yes,
will.
I agree. I think they're definitely very important. And that goes to that. Let me step back to the risk that I was talking about. The fact that the AI systems are not static systems brings unique risk and brings unique opportunities. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't think we can realize those opportunities unless we know what those risks are and proactively and strategically set the right controls in place and the right mindset in place. So when I mentioned that I come from a lineage of Fortune creating actionable strategic programs for cybersecurity and privacy for Fortune 500s, global Fortune 50s, really large companies with a lot of complexity. Let's just put it that way. And a large regulation and global working environment. So complexity coming from that as well. But when I started taking a look at the lens I was looking at it through, when AI started taking a look at how to secure AI, how are we going to get the value from these systems, started realizing that security was not going to be enough to make these systems secure. And that's when I started taking a look at how do we get that intended value? How do we make these systems resilient? And had defined 8 essential pillars of trustworthy AI. This is 5 years ago. And the idea is not to make it cumbersome, but to be very clear as to what a system can pose in terms of risk from those 8 pillars. I'll tell you what they are: security and privacy, okay, transparency. If you don't know what a system is doing, why it's supposed to be, why it's set up, that's what I mean by transparency. What is it? What is the intended value of the system? And what is it supposed to be doing? So transparency being the third pillar. Fourth, things such as bias and ethics, okay, can be really critical in not getting the value you are going to get from a system if you don't bake this in, integrate in ethics, and have an idea of how it can be detrimental, or maybe it won't play a role in what you're doing. But definitely taking ethics as the very, very strong part of that integration of what that pillar is as a pillar. Okay. So we have covered four: security, privacy, transparency, ethics, and then accountability, really important. So when you're creating a COE, and who's responsible for making a system, what is that system outcome going to be, and who's going to be held responsible? If you have a autonomous car, for example, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Who's putting in what logic, what is the algorithm going to be doing, etc. So that's what I mean by explainability and accountability. And the last one being regulations, okay? Regulations and audit also, okay? Now, you may think that these are quite a few, right? How do we get the value? How do we identify what the risk is? That's where the COE comes in. So taking a look at that pragmatic approach on what is what can be a risk for a given context, right? What I had done was taken those pillars, created a framework for operationalizing that into governance. So each pillar is not important for every initiative, right? Some things
Right.
may have nothing to do with ethics. There may be nothing involved. There may be something if you're rolling out a system which is in customer service, for example, right? You may have ethics. You may have to look at some of these pillars, but not all of them are going to be involved, as opposed to if you're looking in legal, if you're looking in the example I gave you earlier, or Target, for example, using it for deploying it in the operationalizing their manual, basically, of how to operate the business in the handheld devices, etc. Whatever the case may be. But the COE that I had led out with in the beginning, Ben, is that center of excellence with those cross-siloed teams. For example, very important to know for each and every AI initiative, what is the business use case, right? Who from the business is asking for or is looking at a particular functionality? Now, the data governance team may or may not have a role to play depending on, is the data classified? What is the categorization of the data? The compliance team, the legal team, the engineering team. What are you going to be building out, and how are you going to get the value from the system? Can any of these pillars come into play as a roadblock in getting that value? If the data is corrupt, for example, I'll give you one example from a real world client.
Yeah.
In rolling out a mission critical, using generative AI to roll out a chatbot for things that are mission critical for the company, okay? And in this case, what was important in here was not only the fact that you have secured your interfaces between the data, where you're getting the data, extremely important that there's no data poisoning, they know cybersecurity is taken care of. And I won't go into too much more detail, but there's a lot just in security there. But Having said that, making sure, let's say, assume that the data is secure and all the interfaces between the different systems that the data is being pulled from is valid, authorized, and you're getting the right data. But then there are things such as if you're going to be asking that chatbot for a question about something that is mission critical, let's say, I can't really give the example of what that might be, but one of the things you have to be really careful with generative AI is hallucinations or confabulation. If you are in a mission critical environment and you have to be aware that everything that you get back is you have to be tempering it with reality and your subject matter expertise, okay, to make sure that the answers make sense, that you don't take the guidance as is or output as is and use it as a decision, but you're using it for helping make a decision but not making the decision, okay. So those are the kind of things that are extremely important and can be done by a case by case basis. There is no one size fits all through a center of excellence. You have a onboarding process. What is the system supposed to be doing? What is the context? What is the risk? Which one of those 8 pillars can play a role? If it's a medical system and you are determining who gets what level of medical care depending on the data that you have, we've seen issues with bias coming in there, right? Those who have not, and I won't go too much more into detail because I know we're opening up for questions here from the audience. But what I want to highlight is that center of excellence is a yes center, okay? It is, yes, you want this. This is how we can make it happen. These are the risks that we can experience. It could be from the ones that I've mentioned, for example, or any others. And in order to get the value from this system, this is what your team needs to be aware of. These are things that you put in place before, this is during, and this is after. And I haven't even gone into what is red teaming. Okay. Red teaming is something that is a term that is borrowed from cybersecurity, but the way I use it for my client is extremely multifaceted. It's not siloed. Okay. It's not security at all. Okay. It has representation from business. What is the system supposed to be producing? We want business to not only just do UAT testing, but also do functionality testing, meaning outcome testing, meaning are these, if there is any confabulation in any of the output, what process do you have in place to make sure that it doesn't become a detriment? Okay. There is red teaming is performed by the prod team, by the engineering team, and the governance team, and I'm sorry, the IRM team, the security team. So this is not something that we want to be going in with blinders on, right? We want to get the value, and there is high compelling value from these systems. I gave you the example of those 360,000 hours savings. That is how many people that is. That's about 36 humans in a year that you're talking about, roughly for this. So the value is so compelling. But in order to get that intended outcome and the benefit, that's where you leverage the COE and put in the right controls, put in the right measures, and take a look at what the initiatives are and put in the right.
Wonderful.
Okay.
What I love about what we're doing here is I get to take two folks and everybody who's watching. We have Damien, we have Pamela, we have Igor, people who have intellectual rigor and experience as humans on solving some of the most complex issues of our time in AI and put them together and ask questions and learn your knowledge. So thank you so far. Before we go to the Q&A, because the questions from the audience are coming in, what's one quick advice you would give to leaders on embedding AI governance into their AI or otherwise as you see? Igor, start us off.
Yeah, I don't know. It's for me, like I said, I like the small wins to get people comfortable with it. Look, none of us were born from our mothers knowing calculus. You can find a fighter pilot today, but nobody gave him an F-16 a long time ago, or heaven forbid, an F-22, F-35. So you have to start very small, and then you can evolve quickly as well. So I think a lot of times the C-suite rolls things down to, or, I'm sorry, the board rolls it to the C-suite, rolls it down to senior leaders and things like that, and everybody's panicking like chickens without heads running around. We must get AI. And I'm like, do you really even need AI, or is it something more deterministic that you can be doing as well? And I think you already used the term. I believe in it building an augmented intelligence capability. Because if you think about what a $1 trillion company dreams of, is to become a $10 trillion company. A $100 billion company dreams of becoming a $1 trillion company, so on and so forth. How long it takes to cook a human being for them to be relevant to an enterprise, it's at least 20 plus years, right? In order to nurture one of these individuals, educate them, and caretake for them as well. The reason why I believe in augmented intelligence is I don't believe in people being disrupted. You know, I believe in the fact that we'll still have generally low unemployment. It's just what we can do is the equivalent of 10 units of work. But yeah, start small.
Thank you.
I would say for integrating, let me step back actually, not just about integrating governance, right? To start off with, where is the value from AI coming in into my organization? And what's the value proposition? What is the risk proposition? And do I have the outline of that COE, for example, set up? It doesn't have to be a full-fledged COE, but to have the elements of that, somebody who can work with the business and realize what the business value is that they're looking to do, know your data, and really make sure that you are prepared to roll out AI, because whether it's generative AI or it's predictive AI, whether it's using RAG or whether it's using your own company data for getting the value, you'll have to have the basic capability in place. And for that, data has to be clean, data has to be classified, there has to be data governance, for example, in place. That is really important. That in addition to having a vision of what is the value you want to get. But I would say more important than anything else a leader will do to gain the intended outcomes is to bring the company with them and not be a ivory tower exercise that they want to get a value, because unless the organization is aware of how it's going to impact their job and how they can use it to do better and perform better, it is going to be a tug of war in trying to get that value. Because if people feel they're going to lose their jobs, they're alienated, they don't see the value, I have seen so much of digging your heels into the ground because you're not going to budge me, I'm not going to adopt this, or putting in a lot of roadblocks into place just because they didn't realize that A, there people are threatened by AI. Is it coming for my job? Or not even if it's not coming for the job, they don't know how to, it's unknown, they don't know how to use it. Unless, if as a leader, this is what I would do. If I'm setting up, I want to adopt AI in my company, be very clear as to what is the kind of data I have, what is the value I can get. Start having those conversations with the business teams, the different business heads, about what is the data that you have, what is the value you can gain with this. Start having those conversations, but putting that governance outline in place, that COE outline in place, a skeletal one even, where you have the ability to do that onboarding process for an AI initiative, to do the pros and cons, right? Weigh risk as opposed to value that you want to get out of it.
And that's the first question from the audience. Who owns the COE? And should it be built internally or externally by consultancy? This time, let's start with Damien, because I know, Damien, you actually have some experience with this as well. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your perspectives.
So from the clients that we are engaged with in AI and also historically in automation, the centre of excellence really needs to be owned at the C-suite level. It has to be taken from the top down. This is how our clients that we've helped have adopted it. And then they have at times gone to third parties, people who are individuals, people like yourself, subject matter experts who consult, etc., and come on board and look at the strategy and who to maybe bring it into the centre of excellence across the business. But equally, some businesses choose and elect just to do that completely internally. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that. But I think I'd love to hear what Pamela and Igor think. But the centre of excellence really needs to be from the top down. It can't be mid-level and then reporting up and down. I think it needs to start at the top. But I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, look, as we intersect with a myriad of government agencies in Fortune 500, remember, I'm a vendor knocking on their door. So either the COE will get it and will end up figuring something out, or water finds a way around a rock. So it can be a blessing or a curse to have that power concentrated in one particular area. And then you eventually could end up just going to a line of business and saying, no, hey, I like a laser scalpel. I know specifically how this AI will essentially move that business case for you as well. So I don't think there's a recipe in one way or another. I think fine. It can be a gravity well to get people to come in and for training, AI literacy, understanding, hey, let's track all the laws. Is this EU AI Act going to affect our global business, so on and so forth? What does it mean? How are vendors doing? Are they changing T's and C's on us where our client data is getting leaked out there? What is, are our employees allowed to use ChatGPT at work or not? All of those things that have to be figured out in a centralized way, but the vendors are showing up, they're going to try to do that. Vendors don't take no for an answer. And if you give them that, boom, they'll immediately go, if they're shrewd and they know anything about your organization, they're going to go right to the line of businesses as well. So it's more art than science. Yeah.
Definitely. Pamela, it'd be good to get your take on this.
Yeah, I think the AICOE, where what we're doing is setting it up with across management, across different business leaders, across the organization. And one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing out there is even if you have the right representation in the COE, they don't often know what or how they're supposed to really manage that role that they're in. Okay. So that is where that's the first starting point. So you might have the right players involved, but in terms of representing across different teams, but oftentimes because AI is not that well understood, the AI risk versus value, how do you do that calculation is not well understood. What is they may know what the value is that they want for a particular business team, but not the others may not know enough to weigh in and provide that guidance for that proper AI governance program. That's one thing. The other thing that we have not talked about, which is a very big reality for any company today, is not only the AI that they're trying to build inside the company or what they are deploying, but the one that is coming in, there isn't any vendor that you may have in-house already, starting from Microsoft to, any other products that you're using, which is not getting AI factored in, right? That is not adopting AI, and that is completely beyond your control, right? So how do you go about identifying what those risks might be that is from technology that you are using already, but now has AI or generative AI components to it. So that is why this is not something that AI COE or AI governance can be left to chance, right? That okay, we'll get it right someday. This
There's
is not a
multi-layered.
cybersecurity program that you can,
And they need to learn, and they need to
Yeah,
be
and
obtain that
integrate.
learning. Do all companies need AI? This came from the audience questions. Let's just go back for a second. And if not, which companies don't need AI?
All companies need AI in the same way that you had web presences, mobile, cloud computing. All AI is a synthetic human. So for every one person that you'll have, maybe you'll have digital twins of them or cadres of synthetic individuals that do different things as well. Remember, at the dawn of the information age, Everybody thought that there would be these vast job disruptions and things of that sort. The only folks that lost their jobs really were the middle managers that said, I'm out. I don't want to deal with these computers. I don't know, how they're relevant to the things that I know how to do, right? I'm a pen and paper person. Same thing here now as we're at the dawn of the intelligence age, as Bezos says, it's still first pitch, first inning. You're not going to be displaced in your job. You're going to be displaced in your job by what? If you're an attorney, by another attorney that knows how to use AI. If you're a physician, by another physician that knows how to use AI. If you're a pilot, another pilot that knows how to use AI, so on and so forth. From dock workers to factory workers to farmers and things of that sort as well. So yeah, it's here, and people will stop fetishizing it in the same way that nobody cares about talking about cloud anymore or mobile anymore or things of that sort. It's just going to be table stakes. I miss
Yeah.
the punk rock days when there weren't a lot of us doing it. It wasn't the carnival atmosphere that you see now. But look, there'll be another shiny toy. What's a shiny toy after this? Quantum.
Okay, everybody, we just established everybody needs AI. Not everybody spoke, of course, but if I'm going with the principles here, everybody needs it. Pamela was teaching us from experience that even when you have a good center of excellence, it doesn't mean they know what to do. They need to get trained on it. Everybody needs it, but they need to get educated on how to apply, even if they're experts or at the C-level in their industries, how to work together to do that. Do I get consensus? I love naysayers, so please point out if we're wrong. That's consensus. Human intelligence comes before artificial intelligence.
I think there were some other questions, things around how do we ensure that the COE itself is ethical from the outset. I'm sure there's some quick fire answers on that. And then there was a question to me about building COE teams. Obviously, myself and Boston Quantara have done that and are in the process of doing that. And they've got history doing that in automation as well. So we're quite well versed at that. But I'd like to finish with that quick question around how do you ensure that the COE is ethical from the outset? Just a quick minute each, maybe starting with you, Pamela.
I see ethics as a part of that trustworthiness that I talked about, which was those 8 pillars: security, privacy, ethics, transparency, explainability, audit, regulations, and accountability. Without accountability, there is going to be more chaos and more unrealized potential. I think trustworthiness is where I see it. I think trustworthiness is, it's again, not, we don't want to take a siloed approach. Just ethics is not going to be enough. Really need to take a look at it from a holistic perspective, and that's how I approach COE.
Igor, one final on how to start with ethics at the beginning.
Yeah, here's what I would say. You can basically judge somebody based on what they bring you. There are a number of AI companies that are operating as criminal organizations. They're nonprofits that turn into for-profits. They stole a lot of copyrighted content. They knew that they had a alignment problem vis-a-vis hallucinating and making things up. They didn't tell people that they were wired as reinforcement learning with human feedback. That meant a lot of spill of employee data and sensitive client data went to offshore locations. And then the worst of the lot, they're telling people to use it for mental health support, which obviously is turning to all sorts of horrible second order effects and things of that sort. So at times you can judge these folks when you literally say, hey, give me some literal tools that you would bring into our craftsman's box and just use that as a thought experiment and see their chain of thought in terms of some of the vendors that they would work with and then why, and then you can run your own distance measure then where they're ethical or not, and then see if they have an understanding of the upcoming regulation and why there was debates around it as well too. So it has to be experiential. Nobody can just show up and wear a button saying I'm ethical.
You can, but you might not be trusted
Right.
for good reason. Look, thank you once again to the panel and to our audience members. We will be running this on a monthly basis. Ben will be a staple part of what we do, and so will I. If you want to contact any of us, obviously we're all on LinkedIn and different areas. Also, you can contact us at Boston Quantara. And look, we're really looking forward to interacting with you all in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for being
Very
humans.
much.
Thanks for listening to the Boston Quantara podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll be back with more insights on AI governance and how to leverage technology effectively. Until next time.